Sana Vavatu Sano Bhunaktu Saviryam Karva Vai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that Brahman may he protect us, may he guide us, may he give us strength and right understanding. May what we hear today be a source of enlightenment for us in our future. May love and peace be with us all. Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace. Today, we're fortunate. We have Andreas here today with a very wonderful treasure. You don't even, you're not even able to appreciate this treasure. Most Americans, probably most Indians too, are unable to appreciate what we're hearing, going to hear right now. But it is a sonnet by Sri Aurobindo, and it's an experience. You might say it's a giving of his experience in this musical form as a poetry. Grace. Morning. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Grace. Yeah, this sonnet is worth gold, more than gold. You don't find things like this. Much of what we have in this country, what appears from the Middle Ages, some of the so-called treasures that were written by great souls, they're in another language, they're in translation. We don't get the full force. And of course, they're often coming from a different perspective also. But this is written in English. It's not a translation. It's the full force of the consciousness that is there. It's a very high consciousness. And that's exactly what this place is about, what we're talking about. It's all about consciousness and growing in consciousness. We've said a number of times, this place is just two things. First, it's an ashram. Second, it's a teaching institution which teaches people what an ashram is all about. An ashram is all about developing inwardness. That's what's going on here. The whole of sadhana is developing inwardness. First, we're an ashram. Second, we're an educational institution which teach people what an ashram is all about. An ashram is all about developing inwardness. And inwardness is the name of the game. That means, in our sense, growing in consciousness. These various, what we call spiritual sadhanas, are all aimed at that very thing. Meditation is made to facilitate the development of growing in consciousness. It promotes growing in consciousness. Japam, what we call repeating the mantra, promotes growing in consciousness. Prayer does the same thing, promotes growing in consciousness. Spiritual reading, study, devotion. These all have the same intention, developing inwardness, growing in consciousness, and they're universal. It doesn't matter where you go. So many other places, they're all aimed at the same thing in different ways, from a different perspective. But our particular perspective is what we call the Vedanta. And it's all aimed at the same developing inwardness. And it's all about change. We have to change because what we're doing is we're moving from outside, as we say, to inside. Outside means right here. This is outside. This is mind. This is where the ego is. This is where we spend most of our time. This is where most of our consciousness is. It's here in the head. But where our real home is here. It's in the heart area. That's inside. This is outside, this is inside. And that's what the whole direction of sadhana, moving from outside to inside. And that's what we're all about. That's what this place is all about. That's what meditation does. That's what japa does. That's what prayer does. That's what deep thinking does. That's what karma yoga does. Selfless service. All developing inwardness. Now we use a word here which most people in the West aren't, they've heard this word but they don't know what it means. They don't relate to it. And I don't know how many other people relate to it too, because it's an incredibly interesting word, this word Brahman. We use this word Brahman, and we have a synonym for this word, which is called Satchaitanya. Now some people will use this word God as a synonym for Brahman. I think it's extremely misleading. It satisfies a lot of people, but if they really knew what it meant, they'd wake up to something much more significant here, because when we say Sat Chit Ananda, that means beingness, consciousness, bliss. Sat is being. That's what when you say I am, you're talking about beingness. I am. You are. That's beingness. That's Sat. Chit means consciousness. Consciousness of your beingness. I know I'm aware of my beingness. Chit, consciousness. Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Ananda means bliss, or might mean joy. Joy in our consciousness of being. That is so very close to being just simply psychological, absolutely beyond skepticism of any sort, because that's exactly what you are. You are that. I am that. We are that. We are that beingness. We are that consciousness of being. There's no doubt. There's no reason to even raise a question about it. The Ananda part, of course, is a little bit questionable for many people, because we've covered ourselves with so much junk, with so much ignorance, with so much wrong thinking and identity, that we've missed the feeling of that Ananda considerably. And some people will commit suicide. Many people will, simply because they've covered themselves with a blanket, as it were, of some sort of ignorance, and so they're not feeling it. But when you feel it more, it's quite obvious. And that's what meditation is all about too, to get to inside, closer to inside. That means the heart area, closer to that Ananda, closer to the beingness, that plus side of things. That's what this place is all about, and that's what we're concerned with. We don't talk about, well, many people will, but when we're talking about the Vedanta itself, we're talking about that Brahman as our very selves. It's what we are. And what we're doing here is aiming at change, and it's not change just for change's sake. It's what we're trying to do is eliminate our small consciousness for a large consciousness. We're trying to move out of our smallness. We're trying to move out of our weakness. Trying to move out of our vulnerability to that which is beyond that sort of thing, and that's deep within. And that's what this place is all about: developing inwardness and realizing that reality which we are, reality which starts up here, right here, with a big R, reality with a big R, our real selves. Now when we understand this as being what we're all about, as the real goal of life, we have to come to the conclusion this is about the most important thing we could be seeking, the most important thing we could be doing. And unfortunately, we have a big problem with this word consciousness itself, because most people, or a lot of people, they don't relate to this word. They think of it as something that scientists throw around as a kind of mental sort of thing, when in fact what we're after is something quite different, quite more than that, which is to say Satchaitanya itself. Now I don't know if I'll be able to get this, but let's just see. I went to oops. I want that one. Yeah, well, I don't even know how to do that.
On the left, next to the gas arrow.
Click where?
Over here on the middle. Go through that. Up here. Excuse me.
Cheers, huh?
Go back down. Can you get that bar back again? This one?
Hmm. That's not what we want. Anybody know how to do this? I want that. That's the one I want.
Which one?
That one.
The color one?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. Is that the color one?
On the far right.
Oh, I'm right.
Yeah.
No, not that one?
No, no, no.
Same one?
No, the one that's almost dark on the farthest right.
What do you mean farthest right? This here? Oops, sorry. This here?
No, no, down below, next line.
This
Yeah,
here?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cheers.
All right, let's see.
Yeah, that's one.
So it's over. Oh, why is it sorry, they always went the wrong way. I see the difficulty here.
Rather.
One more. No, is that it?
No. There you go. Okay, we got it there. Okay. That's good. This is called Mother's Prayer. This is something I found very helpful and interesting. This is a mother who was with Sri Aurobindo many years ago. And this was her prayer. She says, Dearly beloved, O kind and light, source of kindness and mercy, joy and delight, sovereign oneness, source of beauty and harmony, force and realization, love and compassion, source of silence and contemplation, light and knowledge, life and immortality, source of youth and progress, abundance and plenitude, strength and health, source of peace and vastness, power and invincibility, triumphant truth, victorious truth. Dearly beloved, take possession of this instrument and manifest yourself. Now, why is this so significant to me? It was her prayer. She's a very realized soul. All these things come from the source. The power comes from the source, the light comes from the source, the life comes from the source, the joy, the beauty and the harmony, the force, all comes from the source. What that means to me is these are aspects of divinity itself. That is, these are all aspects of consciousness. So when we say Brahman, Satchaitanya, we're talking about all these aspects also that are that consciousness. These are all aspects of divinity itself, which means these are extremely substantial and extremely interesting. These are huge pluses in itself. That is, these are not fantasies, these are the divine itself in its work and as it manifests throughout our lives in different ways in our lives and bodies. That is what consciousness is. It's not what the scientists are talking about when they're just talking about their general kinds of awareness. This gives us a much richer sense of what Satchitananda is. That Brahman, full of life, full of color, full of force. This is what consciousness is. It's not something colorless. It's not something intellectual, mental. It's far, far beyond the mind. In fact, it's nothing to do with the mind. It's beyond the mind. Here's mind. That consciousness is here. It's beyond mind. It's a completely different thing. Sat, Chidananda, beingness, consciousness, bliss. What we are. That's what we're interested in. And as we said, what could be more important or interesting than this? Because it's what we are. It's what it's all about. That's what we might call the strength of this place. The strength of this place is that which we are. Swamiji, he has this word, there's something to say about strength. He says, this is the one question I put to every man, woman, and child when they're in physical, mental, or spiritual training. Are you strong? Do you feel strength? For I know it is truth alone that gives strength. I know that truth alone gives life. And nothing but going towards reality will make us strong. And none will reach truth until he is strong. And that's what we're after. And that's what is to be found. Peace and vastness, power and invincibility. It's there. It's the nature of consciousness itself. Invincibility. No small thing. And when we read the lives of, like, the mother who was with Sri Aurobindo, you're looking at that in her life, what's happening, what was taking place. As Swamiji says, Swami Vivekananda, he says, each soul is potentially divine. That is each one of us. The goal is to manifest this divinity within ourselves by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work, that means karma yoga, or worship, that means bhakti yoga, or psychic control, that's Raja yoga, or philosophy, that means jnana yoga. But actually philosophy, what we're talking about, this word philosophy is one of those words that'd be better not to have that word, because we don't really relate to that word in a positive way anymore. It's so bland and so nothing, because we're talking about knowledge, and we're talking about psychology, and we're talking about spirituality. We're talking about a great deal of our humanity, and knowing about that. That is what he's saying, philosophy. That's the jnana yoga. By one or more or all of these and be free. This is the whole of spirituality. Doctrines, dogmas, rituals, books, temples, forms. They're but secondary details. They're hardly very important. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest that divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. So that's what we do when we get into meditation. That's what we do when we get into what we call sadhana. That's what we're doing when we repeat our mantra. If you've got a mantra, that's something, for many people that will be the only thing they will do. They'll simply be repeating a mantra 20 hours a day. Not many people are so dedicated to that, but the mother, Sarda Devi, she recommended huge numbers. And she said, some people, I don't know how many people, came to her and complained that they weren't making any progress. She said, you repeat that mantra so many thousand times a day, and then you come and tell me you're not making progress. Because she knew for certain, because then in her life, that's exactly what she did, and it was through that especially that she got a great deal of spiritual realization. That's repeating the mantra. It's a very special phrase, word, whatever it is that you have. It's very important to have. Sri Aurobindo, he gives us a particular promise, which is something we should hear about and maybe memorize. He says, if mankind only caught a glimpse of what infinite enjoyments, what perfect forces, what luminous reaches of spontaneous knowledge, what wide realms, wide calms of our being lie waiting for us in the tracks which our animal evolution has not yet conquered, they'd leave all and they'd never rest till they had gained these treasures. But the way is narrow, the doors are hard to force, and fear, distrust, and skepticism are there, tentacles of nature to forbid the turning away of our feet from more ordinary pastures. If mankind only caught a glimpse of what infinite enjoyments, what perfect forces, what luminous reaches of spontaneous knowledge wait, what wide calms of our being lie waiting for us in the tracks which our animal evolution has not yet conquered. It's another affirmation. You learn more about from Sri Aurobindo, and you're beginning to understand something of the possibilities. And that's what we need. We need a lot of inspiration. We need to learn about these things, that they are here, they are waiting for us, and we can have them. And it's not as hard as we imagine it to be. In fact, actually one of the things I'm not even sure we're going to be able to cover today, but one of the things we're talking about today is the difference between this book by Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. We want to get into that book because it's a new insight. It's a new thing that's come along, which did not exist 50 years ago. The understanding did not exist 50 years ago. It's something new, which is an incredible insight today, which we should be knowing about it because it's so helpful. It makes growing in consciousness much easier, simply by understanding what he means by what's the title of that book? Power versus Force. Yes. Just knowing what those two words mean can make a big difference. Understanding that can make a big difference. In fact, it'll change your thinking. Well, what we're talking about today, especially talking about today, are some new insights that have come to us new insights that we did not have much earlier, new insights which expand our understanding tremendously. I'm trying to communicate those if I can. We'll see how well it works out. One of those insights came some years ago. It came from a little girl named Anna, in a book called Mr. God, This is Anna, which, if you're lucky, you may have seen it and read it. It's a true story about a little girl, 4 years old, London, ran away from home. She was being abused, as it were. But she ran away from home at the age of 4 years, and she was fortunate enough to run into somebody named Finn, a young man who was very lucky to have met her, and who is recording his life with Anna for several years when she was with him. And one of the very main things that she's all about, she has this obsession about Mr. God. She dreams about Mr. God. She prays to Mr. God. She has a very firm conviction that there is such a thing as Mr. God. And the book starts out with a question. The book actually was written 30 years after she left the body. And in the book, somebody asks a question, rather a trivial question, that is an insincere question. The person asks, what's the difference between an angel and a person? She must have been about 7 years old when she's answering this, because she'd learned a great deal in the few years that she'd been struggling with Mr. God. She was trying to understand Mr. God. So she answered this immediately. She said, the difference between Mr. God is easy. That is, an angel and Mr. God is easy. An angel and man. Excuse me. She said, an angel is mostly in the inside. A man is mostly on the outside. What that means is, she's talking about inside, outside. And actually, the whole book is about this subject, inside and outside. This is outside. This is where a man is. He's mostly on the outside. An angel is mostly in the inside. That first sentence is what the whole book is about. And the whole book is her continual questions which she asked and got answers to about what's the nature of Mr. God, what is the nature of this inside, what's the nature of this outside. That is a wonderful insight. It's a new insight, although a number of other great souls have talked about it too, but they haven't talked about it in quite the same clear way. The other great insight is multiple, and that's it's all about power versus force. That's this book by David Hawkins. And I'd like to give a few minutes talking simply about who this person is, David Hawkins, because he has done so much for us, and we don't even realize how much he's done. But David Hawkins was a psychiatrist, and he was very famous. He wrote a book, Orthomolecular Psychiatry, with Linus Pauling, who received a Nobel Prize, which indicated that this is a person of some substance who's heavy with the science in his background. He's not a light touch, and he's not somebody who's lightly taken. He's taken seriously by many people, and he's received so much attention. He's been on the McNeil Lehrer NewsHour. I think Barbara Walters has interviewed him. He's very, very well known, an extremely successful psychiatrist during those years when he was working at a huge clinic. He had thousands of people working for him in incredible bed space for people coming from all over the world to his clinic. But in his younger years, he had a lot of ailments, a lot of diseases of whatever sort, and one of them was killing him. And I don't remember the name of it, what it was, but in a later book, maybe about 10 books he's written, which are offshoots of Power versus Force. He talks about what particular ailment was killing him, and he knew he was dying. And I think it's worth reading a few of his words, because this gives you a sense of his voice, what you're hearing, what kind of person this is. He says he's about to die. He's on his deathbed. He's about to lose consciousness, and he knows that. He said, and also this man was what you call a truth seeker, and he'd become a psychiatrist partly with the idea of seeking the truth, wanting to be a finder, wanting to find some gold in that respect, but he hadn't. His life was frustrated in this particular way, and he was in despair. He hadn't found it. In Freudian psychology and Western psychology of that time, he wasn't finding what he was hoping to find. And instead, he just found nothing really significant. He says, I knew I was about to die. I didn't care about my body, but my spirit was in a state of extreme anguish and despair. As my final moment approached, the thought flashed through my mind, what if there is a God? Now, as a matter of fact, he'd been brought up in a spiritual home. His father was, I guess, Anglican, something like a bishop of some sort. But he'd renounced all of that. He'd considered himself an atheist through much of his younger years, and he'd become this, you might say, Freudian, and joined what the modern psychology of that time was all about. It was very anti-religion and things like that. But he said, what if there is a God? So I called out in prayer, if there is a God, I ask him to help me now. I surrendered to whatever God there might be, and I went unconscious. When I awoke, a transformation of such enormity had taken place that I was struck dumb with awe. The person I had been no longer existed. There was no personal self or ego left, just an infinite presence of such unlimited power that it was all that was. This presence had replaced what had been me, and the body and its actions were controlled solely by the presence, infinite will. The world was illuminated by the clarity of an infinite oneness, which expressed itself as all things revealed in their immeasurable beauty and perfection. And then it goes on. It was not function, it was not possible. He says, for 9 months this stillness persisted. I had no will of my own. Unbidden, the physical entity went about its business under the direction of the infinitely powerful but exquisitely gentle will of the presence. Now this presence is what we're interested in. This is what we call the self with a capital S. This is why those of us who are here and doing sadhana are doing that. We're trying to get to that. because that is exactly our Sat, Chit, Ananda. Beingness, our beingness, consciousness, bliss. Found in a very big way with David Hawkins. And he's calling it presence. And that presence is very much completely taken over his life, as it were. He's become, as it were, a witness of what's happening, of how his life is being run. In that state, there was no need to think about anything. All truth was self-evident. No conceptualization was necessary or even possible. At the same time, the nervous system felt extremely overtaxed, as though we were carrying far more energy than the circuits had been designed for. It was not possible to function effectively in the world. Along with fear and anxiety, all ordinary motivations had disappeared. There was nothing to seek, as all was perfect. Fame, success, money, they were all meaningless. However, I discovered I could perceive the reality of the underlay personalities. And as working as a psychiatrist, he did work some as a psychiatrist. He could see very deeply into his patients to see what was wrong, what sort of help they could benefit by. So I'm skipping here. It is all very interesting, and you'll have to read the Power versus Force in order to get this. But it says, the years were spent in inner silence, and the strength of the presence grew. I had no personal life. My personal will no longer existed. I was an instrument of the infinite presence, and I went about and did as it willed. People felt an extraordinary peace in the aura of that presence. Seekers sought answers from me, but as there was no individual as David any longer, what these people were doing was finessing answers from their own selves, which were no different from mine. As I looked at each person, myself shone forth from their eyes. How did I get into all these bodies, I wondered. The miraculous happened beyond ordinary comprehension. Many chronic maladies from which I had suffered for years disappeared. My eyesight spontaneously normalized. I no longer needed bifocals. He says, as I looked at each person, myself shone forth from their eyes. How did I get into all these bodies? Myself shone forth from their bodies, from their eyes. How did I get into all these bodies? Here's our sonnet. I contain the whole world in my soul's embrace, and the arc terraced and Belphegor burn. To whatsoever living form I turn, I see my own body with another face. All eyes that look at me are my soul eyes. The one heart that beats within all breast is mine. It's the very same experience. This is Sri Aurobindo. This is David Hawkins. Two different people having something of the similar experience. It doesn't have to be similar experiences, but in this case, why, it's very interesting just to see that. Now, we have this book, Power versus Force. It's all about consciousness. It's all about growing in consciousness. It's talking about power versus force. Now, if I can just get back where we were before. Mother's grace. Yeah.
There you go,
Oh.
you got it.
Yeah. You're right. Well, more or less. This is a scale. This is something. It's a new thing. What we're looking at is a scale. This has never been seen before, like 50 years ago. It's new. This is the fruit of what we call kinesiology, which was only started in 1971 by somebody, I don't remember, some physical therapist, physiotherapist, and taken by some others and amplified. And when David Hawkins discovered this, he found it very useful. And over a period of 20 years or more, he has been working on it to make it give us this so-called map of consciousness with this scale of 1 all the way to 1,000, which represents the whole scale of human consciousness in terms of moods and mental states. This is what first attracted me when somebody just in Ganges, Michigan, had brought this book, Power versus Force, and rather than give it to me and tell me to read this because I might be interested, she just put the book in a particular place where she knew I would see it and be automatically curious. And I did. And the thing is, this is almost the same thing as in the Bhagavad Gita, where we're talking about the gunas. It's the very same thing. Moods and mental states in a progression from lowest to highest. And that's the very interesting thing here that we find. Moods and mental states. A huge expansion, and it entails so much more psychology. In the Gita, a lot of people today, they don't think, they take it as something simplistic, not something to be taken seriously. And unfortunately, they miss the very fact of what is there and what it's all about. And it's all about this very same thing. The whole idea of there is something called consciousness. There is lower consciousness. There is higher consciousness. And the lowest states of consciousness are weighed on things like shame, guilt, apathy, grief, also depression, things like this, all the way up, and then a change in these two things, and then you become a different sort of moods and mental states, which are higher. And if you were into the Gita psychology at all, you'd be interested to know that with the use of kinesiology, all of this area from 1 to 199 is tamasic. Kinesiology says that. Came from David Hawkins himself. He didn't even know, as he was working on this thing, this came by itself, on its own, simply because this is the way things are. This is the fact of life. And when his attention was turned to the nature of the gunas, he said, as he saw, all these things from here to 199, below 200, are tamasic moods and mental states. Not only that, but they are the cause of all of our troubles. This is where all of our difficulties come from. Beyond that, from 200 to 499, it's below the level of love. 499 is rajas, the level of rajas. A lot of activity and discovery and mental activity. And beyond that, from 500 to 599, this level of love, That is a very small area, as it were, and that is sattva. That's the sattvic plane. It's a plane, a paradigm in itself, something completely separate, absolutely fantastic in its characteristic. Now, one of the most interesting things about this, or one of the insights that is one of the first things to see or be amazed at, is this, you might say, the difference between power and force. This so-called level of power from 200 on up to 599. That is all, you might say, those people in that realm or range of consciousness are highly aligned with truthfulness. People who would never think to tell a lie. And these people below 199 down, just the opposite. People who tell a lie as quick, as easily as slipping on the ice. That is a fantastic thing, that a particular point in consciousness, the levels of consciousness, could make a division like that. Higher on this scale are people who are serious about the truth, who would never tell a lie. These people who below this, full of falsehood, full of denial, full of what we call life-suppressing behavior, thinking, full of falsehood. Whereas this, above this, is life-supporting. It's a fantastic thing to find, and it's never been here presented to people before, except in our most recent times. They also say the power side is the strong side. This is the weak side. And there's a lot of psychology you can get into here, and to try to get a better understanding of what this is all about. Now, the thing about this, one thing is that every one of these, this is an incredible insight in itself. Every one of these so-called mental states is a force field. It's like a force field. And once you're into it, you're going to stay in it. You can't get out of it so easily. Not long ago, we talked about a book. It's called Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani, who was talking about simply the fact she was dying, and her body was full of cancer, tumors, and she's on her deathbed. She struggled very hard to overcome this, but she's on her deathbed. I mean, she's in a kind of coma, and she was shown very clearly why she was dying. That's the title of the book, Dying to Be Me. The problem was her life had been so full of fear, living a fearful life, and not being herself. Dying to be me. She wasn't living herself. She wasn't being herself. And because she wasn't being herself, her body itself, or her spirit herself, we may say, was complaining and letting her know that it's killing her. She is killing herself simply because she's not being herself. Dying to be me. And she realized in that coma state, as it were, she could see everything that's going on all around her. She could see that this was the reason she was dying, why she had all these tumors, because of her living a life of fear. Fear. The whole life is centered around fear. Fear for this, fear for that, fear of displeasing people, fear of upsetting anybody, fear of doing what you wanted to do, fearing all kinds of things. So her mindset was in that realm of fear, and that is, by its very nature, it's very stressful. And all of this, too, is all very stressful, and it's all full of falseness, and it's all very hard on the body, and it creates a lot, by its very nature, it creates diseases of various sorts in our lives, and kills us. And if we don't somehow change our way of living. I was reading a book not so long ago. It's called Fire Table. Fire. What was the name of that book? Wisdom of the Fire by the Fireplace. Kitchen Table. Yeah. Okay. This is by Bowen, who she was a doctor, but she became an oncologist, and more or less she became a kind of a psychotherapist in part of her work, dealing with the people who are terminal. She's meeting them and talking about their lives and what's come of their treatment so far. And I don't remember how many people she treated, people who had terminal cancer. And they said, this is the best thing that could have happened to me. They're dying. They've got cancer. They know their life is very short. This is the best thing that could happen to me, because they suddenly woke up to what they were doing wrong. Just as Anita Morjani. She woke up, actually she was shown. She was shown why she's dying. It's because of the fear. Because it's a falsehood. It's not true. It's a perception that it's not the way things are. And that's true of all of these things, this whole area down here, all these things, they're all wrong. They're all falsehoods about the nature of the world, the nature of reality, seeing things wrongly. That's what it was with Anita Morjani. That's the way with these other cancer patients. Another particular person I know about, here she was. Now, you don't meet many people. You do meet every now and then, but not many. I haven't met many people living in anger. That is, for whatever reason, they pick up things to be angry about in their lives. It's a very stressful thing. This particular person, she developed all sorts of tumors in her body, and it was killing her. And at one time, she seemed to admit, she seemed to understand, this is why I've got this cancer. She's a young person, fairly young person, because here she is in this stressful state, false state of anger. And this is the thing about it. Once you're in these states of these energy fields, these levels of consciousness, you're generally going to stay there. You're not going to move out of them very, very much, unless for some reason you wake up to the fact of what you're doing, that something is wrong, and something can be done, something that can be done to remedy the situation. And that's what this whole book is about, power versus force. Looking at our situation and trying to move up the scale to higher consciousness. And that's what force is all about, because this whole area is all about force, which means falsehood. It means life suppression, as opposed to life support. And that in itself is a very helpful thing to know. It's a very basic thing to know. And as Sri David, I call him Sri David, as he says about this is a new thing to know about, this whole conception of power and force. And he says, simply by knowing about this, he says, a thorough absorption of the material presented in this book has been shown to be able to raise one's level of consciousness by an average of 35 points. Now these are very special points because they're what they call logarithmic numbers in logarithmic scale. I don't really understand all of that, but if you're very much into math, you might understand it better because it is, as he says, is a terrific jump. He says, since progression of consciousness during the average human lifetime on this earth is only 5 points, a human lifetime, the progression on the average is only 5 points of this 1,000 in one whole life. What we want, if we understand that this is what life is all about, is simply this thing of consciousness, growing on this map of consciousness, moving up. If we simply understand that, we can move much more than that. 5 points is not much. And for these people down here, of course, whether they're moving up at all is questionable because this is the very nature of tamas. Tamas is regressive. It's life suppressive. But he says, since the progression of conscious brain in the average human lifetime on Earth is only 5 points, such an increase in individual awareness is an enormous benefit in and of itself. And as advanced theoretical physics and nonlinear dynamics have shown, any individual increase also raises the consciousness of everyone on the planet to some degree. That is, if any one of us growing in consciousness is going to affect everybody else, we're all going to be benefiting from that. He says, to become more consciousness is the greatest gift anyone can give to the world. To become more conscious is the greatest gift anyone can give to the world. Moreover, in a ripple effect, the gift comes back to its source. So our concern is with consciousness, and this map of consciousness is actually incredibly amazing. As we see, as we have here, it says it's one of the greatest insights. It's a huge help in making things much more realistic and clear for us. He said, never before, as I understand it, have we had a representation of life like this, all in terms of consciousness, and a clear image of what our purpose in life is. That obviously the purpose of life is to move from lower to higher. When we come to reach 600, we've gone over the sattvic stage, and we're into illumination itself, which means we're moving beyond mind. All of this is mind. This is all the area of the gunas. It's the forest of mind. Tamas, rajas, and sattva. It's all this part. But beyond this is spirituality itself, beyond mind, which is where we're trying to get, and higher. As the understanding is, according to this, only the avatars can reach a state of 1,000 on this scale because it's so powerful. Beyond that, other people, ordinary people, or any of us, our nervous systems would break down simply because they're not built to withstand force like that. And the consciousness continues far beyond the human capacities. Well, this is as far as we've gotten today. And at any rate, we get a picture here of this so-called moods and mental states of consciousness. And it simply amplifies so much more, expands so much more our understanding of our psychology, the whole of the psychology. And it simply clarifies this whole business of the gunas, because that's what the gunas are all about too. They're trying to help us to grow in consciousness, grow from tamas through rajas to sattva. From here all the way to here. That's what the subject of the gunas is about. That's why there are four chapters in the Gita, or there's 3 chapters, simply on the gunas, because that is so important, and unfortunately most people totally miss that. They miss the fact. But when you realize that this is exactly the same thing expanded, then it brings it home to you that this is the same thing as the Gita is talking about, but he's making it much clearer for us, much more relevant, because this is all about us, all these mental areas here, and especially all this area between 199 down on here. These are the human areas of trouble. This is where hell comes from. And most people actually, that's where they live. They live in hell. And no concern for truthfulness, no alignment with truthfulness, no concern. They tell the easy lies. When our political figures tell the easy lies, we know they are down here, below 200. And that is not a good place to be. That's a very place not to be. But once we know about these things, know something about what this is all about, know that this is the level of force, which means life suppressing, in a nutshell, then we know that's one thing we want to get out of. We want to leave that area and move higher into the power state, into the alignment with truthfulness, which is our lifeline. If we don't live like that, we don't have a lifeline, and we're in very big trouble.